7 powerful prayers in the Bible that changed everything. There are moments in life when everything around you feels like it's falling apart at once, when answers don't come, strength runs out, and even hope feels distant. In those quiet, heavy spaces, something deep within the soul begins to stir. Not a speech, not a performance, but a cry, a prayer, not the kind that sounds impressive or polished, but the kind that comes from a heart that has nothing left to hold back. The kind of prayer that trembles, the kind that breaks, the kind that reaches for God not because it knows the right words, but because it knows there is nowhere else to go. The Bible is not just a book of stories. It is a living testimony of what happens when ordinary people fall to their knees and call on an extraordinary God. These were people who faced impossible situations, overwhelming fear, deep sorrow, and crushing uncertainty. Yet in those very moments they prayed, and when they did, everything changed. Heaven responded. Chains were broken, lives were transformed, destinies were rewritten. And here's what matters for you. Right now, those prayers were not reserved for the perfect or the powerful. They came from the broken, the desperate, the humble, and the willing. People just like you, people who dared to believe that even in the darkest moment, God was still listening. As we walk through these 7 powerful prayers, don't just see them as history, see them as an invitation, because the same God who answered them is present in your life in this very moment, waiting to hear your voice. Number 1, Hannah's prayer. When God turns deep pain into divine purpose. Hannah's story begins in a place many understand, but few can fully express. A place of silent heartbreak. She longed for a child. Yet year after year, her arms remained empty. In a culture where motherhood was deeply tied to identity and honor, her pain was not only personal but public. The weight of disappointment pressed heavily on her soul, and the sting of mockery made it even harder to bear. But instead of allowing bitterness to take root, Hannah chose a different path. She went to the house of the Lord, not to perform a ritual, but to pour out her soul. Her prayer was not loud or dramatic. In fact, her lips moved, but no sound came out. Yet what seemed silent to others was thunderous before God. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was simply being real. In that sacred moment, Hannah held nothing back. She brought her sorrow, her longing, her confusion, and her hope all at once. She didn't pretend to be strong. She didn't hide her tears. She laid everything before God with a sincerity that cannot be manufactured. This is what made her prayer powerful, not perfection but honesty. Then came a turning point. In the middle of her brokenness, she made a vow. If God would give her a son, she would give him back to the Lord all the days of his life. This was not a bargain rooted in selfish desire, but a surrender born out of trust. Hannah was willing to release the very blessing she was asking for, placing God's purpose above her own comfort. God heard her. In time, he answered her prayer, and Samuel was born, a child who would grow to become one of Israel's greatest prophets. Through Hannah's pain, God brought forth purpose that would impact an entire nation. What once felt like emptiness became the beginning of something far greater than she could have imagined. Hannah's story reminds us that God does not ignore the quiet cries of a wounded heart. He sees the tears no one else notices. He hears the prayers that never make a sound. And when we come to him with honesty and surrender, he is able to transform even our deepest pain into something meaningful. So when your heart feels heavy and your prayers feel small, remember Hannah. You don't need perfect words. You don't need to appear strong. You only need to come as you are, trusting that God is listening and that he can bring purpose out of places that feel broken. Number 2, Solomon's prayer for wisdom. When humility unlocks divine favor, Solomon stood at the beginning of something enormous. He had just become king, stepping into the legacy of his father David. The responsibility was overwhelming. Leading a great nation was not a task he could carry lightly, and deep within he knew that his own strength and understanding would never be enough. In a moment that defined his life, God appeared to Solomon and invited him to ask for whatever he desired. Imagine that opportunity. Limitless provision, open access to anything the heart could want. Many would have asked for power, wealth, victory over enemies, or a long and secure life. But Solomon's response revealed the posture of his heart. Instead of reaching for greatness in the eyes of the world, he asked for wisdom. He recognized his own limitations and acknowledged that without God's guidance, he would fail in leading the people entrusted to him. His prayer was not driven by ambition but by humility. He did not pretend to have all the answers. He sought them from the one who does. This request pleased God deeply, not because wisdom was rare, but because humility is. Solomon's prayer showed a desire to serve well rather than to elevate himself. And in response, God did more than grant his request. He gave Solomon unparalleled wisdom, along with riches and honor beyond what he had asked for. Solomon's life became a testimony to what happens when a person depends on God rather than on their own understanding. His judgments were marked by insight, his leadership by discernment, and his name became known far beyond his own kingdom. All of this began with a simple, sincere prayer. There is something powerful about asking God for what truly matters. Solomon could have chosen temporary gain, but he chose lasting guidance. He understood that when wisdom is present, everything else finds its rightful place, and God honored that perspective. This prayer challenges us to examine our own desires. When we come before God, what are we really seeking? Is it comfort, success, control, or is it the wisdom to walk rightly in every season? Solomon's example reminds us that when we ask with humility and align our hearts with God's purpose, we open the door for his favor in ways we cannot achieve on our own. If you feel uncertain about the path ahead, you are not alone. But like Solomon, you can ask. And when you do, trust that God not only hears, but responds with generosity to those who seek him with a sincere heart. Number 3. Elijah's prayer on Mount Carmel, when faith calls down fire. There are moments when standing for God means standing alone. Elijah knew that reality all too well. Israel had turned away, embracing false gods and losing sight of the truth. The prophets of Baal were many, loud and confident. Elijah stood by himself, a single voice in a nation that had forgotten its foundation. On Mount Carmel, the confrontation was clear. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, 1 true God. The prophets of Baal cried out for hours, shouting, pleading, even harming themselves in desperation. Yet nothing happened. Silence filled the air where they expected fire. Their effort was loud, but it was empty. Then Elijah stepped forward, not with chaos, but with calm authority. He rebuilt the altar of the Lord, piece by piece, restoring what had been broken. He drenched the sacrifice with water, making the situation humanly impossible. Everything about the moment pointed away from human ability and toward divine intervention. And then he prayed. His prayer was simple. No shouting, no performance. Just a few sincere words, asking God to reveal himself, so that the people would know the truth and turn their hearts back again. Elijah wasn't trying to prove himself. He was pointing everything back to God. In response, fire fell from heaven. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, even the water. In an instant, doubt was shattered, and truth stood undeniable before the eyes of the people. What no human effort could achieve, God accomplished in a single moment. Elijah's prayer reminds us that power in prayer does not come from volume or length, but from faith. It comes from a heart aligned with God's purpose, and a willingness to trust him even when standing alone. When faith is placed fully in him, he is able to move in ways that leave no room for doubt. So when you find yourself in a place where truth feels outnumbered and your voice feels small, remember Elijah. You don't need to compete with noise. You don't need to prove anything. You simply need to stand, believe, and pray, trusting that God knows how to answer in his perfect way. Number 4. Hezekiah's prayer for deliverance. When God rewrites the impossible, Hezekiah faced a situation that no strategy could fix. The Assyrian army, powerful and relentless, stood at the gates of Jerusalem. Their threats were not empty. They had already conquered nation after nation. Fear spread quickly, and the words of the enemy were designed to break the spirit of the people before the battle even began. When Hezekiah received the letter filled with intimidation and mockery against God, he didn't respond with panic or pride. He didn't rely on political alliances or human strength. Instead, he went straight to the house of the Lord, and there, In a deeply personal act of faith, he spread the letter out before God. This moment was powerful in its simplicity. Hezekiah brought the problem exactly as it was and laid it before the one who sees all things. He did not try to control the outcome. He did not pretend the threat wasn't real. He acknowledged the danger, but he also acknowledged who God is: sovereign, powerful, and able to save. His prayer was honest. He spoke of the enemy's strength, but more importantly, he declared God's greatness. He asked not only for deliverance, but for God's name to be honored through it. This was more than survival. It was about trusting that God's glory mattered even in crisis. And God responded. In a single night, the situation changed completely. The Assyrian threat was removed in a way no human plan could have achieved. What seemed certain defeat turned into undeniable victory. The impossible was rewritten, not by human effort, but by divine intervention. Hezekiah's prayer teaches us that there is power in bringing our battles directly to God, not after we've tried everything else, but as our first response. It shows us that faith does not deny reality. It places reality in the hands of the one who is greater than it. There are moments in life when the problem feels too big, too overwhelming, too final. But Hezekiah's story reminds us that nothing is beyond God's reach. When we lay our burdens before Him with trust and humility, we make space for Him to move in ways we could never orchestrate on our own. So whatever stands before you today, whatever feels impossible or threatening, don't carry it alone. Lay it before God, speak honestly, trust deeply, and remember that He is still able to do what no one else can. Number 5. Jonah's prayer from the depths. When it's never too late to turn back. Jonah didn't begin as a willing servant. He ran. He knew God's call, yet chose the opposite direction. And if we're honest, there are moments when we do the same, not because we don't hear, but because we're afraid of what obedience might cost us. The storm that followed wasn't random. It became the turning point. When Jonah was thrown into the sea, it looked like the end of his story. But what seemed like judgment was actually the beginning of mercy in disguise. Inside the belly of the great fish, Jonah found himself alone. No distractions, no escape, no one to blame. Just silence, darkness, and the weight of his choices. And in that place, something shifted. He finally stopped running. His prayer didn't come from comfort, but from desperation. It wasn't polished or impressive. It was real. He remembered God, acknowledged his condition, and cried out from the depths of his soul. And that honesty changed everything. The power of Jonah's prayer wasn't in perfect words, but in genuine repentance. He didn't justify himself. He surrendered, and when his heart turned, his direction followed. God didn't wait for Jonah to become perfect. He responded the moment Jonah became sincere. What once felt like a prison became a path to deliverance. This story reminds us of a powerful truth. No place is too deep, no mistake too great. When we turn back to God with a sincere heart, mercy is never out of reach. Number 6. Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane, when surrender changes eternity. In the Garden of Gethsemane, we see one of the most raw and intimate moments of prayer in all of Scripture. Jesus, fully aware of what lay ahead, didn't hide his pain. He brought it honestly before the Father. This wasn't a calm or distant prayer. It was a struggle. The weight of the cross pressed heavily on him. He asked, "If it is possible, let this cup pass from me." There was no denial of fear, no suppression of emotion, only truth. In that moment, we see something deeply human. Faith doesn't mean we don't feel pain. It means we bring that pain to God. Jesus showed that honesty in prayer is not weakness, it's trust. But then came the turning point. "Yet not my will, but yours be done." These words didn't remove the suffering, but they revealed complete surrender, not forced, not reluctant, but chosen. This prayer didn't change the path. It strengthened him to walk it. In surrender, his heart aligned fully with the Father's will. And from that moment, he moved forward with purpose. What happened in that garden shaped eternity. Through surrender, Jesus stepped into his mission and opened the way for salvation. For us, this prayer becomes a model. When life feels overwhelming, we don't have to hide our struggles. We can be honest and then surrender. Because sometimes the greatest breakthrough isn't escape from hardship, but the strength to walk through it with faith. Number 7. The thief on the cross. When one prayer opens paradise. The thief on the cross had nothing left. No future, no second chances, no way to undo his past. He stood at the very end of his life, facing the consequences of everything he had done. Yet in that final moment, something remarkable happened. While others mocked Jesus, this man saw something different. In the middle of suffering, he recognized truth, innocence, and authority. He didn't ask for rescue from the cross. He didn't ask for more time. He simply said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." A short, simple prayer, but filled with faith. There were no religious rituals, no good deeds to offer. Just a heart that believed. And that was enough. Jesus responded immediately. "Today you will be with me in paradise." No delay, no conditions, just grace. In a single moment, everything changed. This story reveals something powerful about God's heart. He is not measuring how long we've prayed, but how real our hearts are, even in our final breath. A sincere turning toward Him matters. The thief had nothing left but faith, and faith was enough to open eternity. His story reminds us that it's never too late. No matter how far someone has gone, one genuine prayer can change everything forever. Conclusion. When your prayer becomes the turning point, these prayers are not just stories from the past. They are living reminders of who God is and how He responds. Across different lives, different struggles, and different circumstances, one truth remains constant. God listens. He listens to the broken, the weary, the uncertain. He hears the silent cries as clearly as the spoken words. Prayer is not about performance. It is about connection. It is the place where honesty meets grace. You may not stand on a mountain like Elijah or kneel in a temple like Hannah. You may not face a storm like Jonah or a cross like the thief. But your situation, your pain, your longing, they matter just as deeply. What these prayers show us is not a formula, but a relationship. A God who responds not to perfection, but to sincerity. A God who meets us in surrender, in faith, and even in our weakest moments. Right now, wherever you are invited into that same conversation. You don't need the right words. You don't need to have everything figured out. You only need a willing heart. Because one prayer, just one, can become the turning point. Not because of how powerful the words are, but because of how faithful the one who hears them is.